I never thought the child I carried for 9 months would one day look at me with shame in his eyes. My name is Margaret, but people in the neighbourhood call me Auntie Maggie. I am 68 years old, my hands wrinkled, my back bent slightly from years of cleaning, cooking and surviving. I was never a beautiful woman, even in my youth, but I was always a loving mother, or at least, I believed I was. My son, Daniel, was my whole world. His father left us when Daniel was only 4 years old. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I cleaned offices at night and washed dishes during the day. There were many nights I went to bed hungry so my son could eat. I never complained. A mother doesn't. Daniel grew up smart, handsome, confident. Everything I was not. When he told me he was getting married, my heart nearly burst with happiness. I cried tears of joy that day. I imagined sitting in the front row, watching my son take his vows, feeling proud that despite all odds, I had raised him well, or so I thought. One evening, Daniel came to visit me. He didn't hug me like he used to. He didn't sit down for tea. He stood near the door, avoiding my eyes. Mum, he said, his voice cold, we need to talk. That sentence, it changes lives. He told me the wedding would be big, very fancy. His bride came from a respected family. There would be important people there. Then he paused, and that pause hurt more than the words that followed. Mum, I think it's better if you don't attend. I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. Don't be silly, Daniel. I'll sit quietly. I won't bother anyone. He finally looked at me then. And when he did, I saw it. Embarrassment. Mum, he sighed. You don't look appropriate. I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean? I whispered. He swallowed. You're old-fashioned. Your face, your clothes, people will stare. I don't want my wife's family to feel uncomfortable. The next words shattered me. You're too ugly for my wedding. Ugly. From the mouth I once kissed goodnight. I stood there frozen while my son explained how my presence would ruin the aesthetic, how pictures mattered, how appearances mattered. I nodded. I smiled. I did not cry in front of him. When he left, I sat on my bed in the dark and cried until my chest burned. But that night, something else was born inside me. Not anger, not hatred, dignity, and I made a quiet decision. If my son wanted a wedding without his mother, then I would give him something far more memorable, a smile he would never forget. The days after Daniel's visit passed slowly, like heavy clouds refusing to move. I did not tell anyone what he said to me, not my neighbour, not my church friends. Shame has a way of silencing a person. I began to look at myself through my son's eyes, my wrinkled skin, my tired face, my cheap clothes. Maybe I really was something to hide, but then I remembered all the times I stood in line at food banks so he could eat well. All the nights I prayed over him when he was sick. All the sacrifices no one ever photographed, and slowly the shame loosened its grip. A week later, Daniel called again. His voice was cheerful. Mum, I need a favour, he said. Of course he did. He told me the wedding expenses were higher than expected. The venue, the flowers, the photographer, everything cost more. I was hoping, he hesitated, you could help me financially. I almost laughed. So I was too ugly to attend, but not too useful to pay. I don't have much, I replied calmly. Why, no, he said quickly, but you own the house. You could take a small loan. It's just for the wedding. That house, the same house I cleaned toilets for. The same house where Daniel learned to walk. The same house that carried my entire life inside its walls. I'll think about it, I said. That night, I opened an old metal box under my bed. Inside were documents Daniel never knew about. Years ago, a distant cousin left me a small inheritance. I invested wisely, quietly. I was not rich, but I was far from helpless. The next day, I went to the bank alone. Not to take a loan, to make a plan. When Daniel visited again, I handed him an envelope. Inside was a generous amount of money. His face lit up. Thank you, Mum, he said, hugging me briefly. I knew you'd understand. Understand? Yes. I understood everything perfectly. The wedding day arrived. I stayed home, just as he wanted. I wore my simplest dress and sat by the window. But somewhere else, something was waiting. Something Daniel never expected, and it would arrive with a smile. The wedding was held in a grand hall across town. White roses, golden lights, laughter, everything perfect. Everything except the truth. As guests enjoyed their champagne, a large screen lit up behind the stage. Daniel had arranged a surprise video presentation, photos from his childhood, messages from loved ones. What he didn't know was that I had arranged one too. A soft voice filled the hall, an old woman's voice, my voice. "Hello, my son," it began. "If you are hearing this, it means you are smiling today." The room fell silent. I spoke slowly, gently, like bedtime stories I once told him. I told them how I raised him alone, how I worked until my hands cracked, how I skipped meals, how I loved him even when life was cruel. Photos appeared on the screen, not glamorous ones, real ones. Me holding him as a baby, me standing outside schools in worn clothes, me smiling with tired eyes. Then my voice changed. Today, my son decided I was too ugly to stand beside him. Gasps filled the room. "Want you all to know," I continued, "that ugliness is not on the face. It is in the heart that forgets love." Daniel's smile faded. His bride turned to him, confused, angry. "I wish you happiness," my voice said softly. "Remember this moment, because this is the last time I will smile for you." The screen went black. Silence. A silence heavier than shame. That day, my son lost something no wedding could replace, and I walked away with my dignity intact. After the wedding video ended, my son did not come to see me. Not that day, not the next, not the week after. At first I thought maybe he was angry, or embarrassed, or too busy enjoying married life. I told myself I didn't care. But a mother always cares. Weeks passed, then months. One afternoon my phone rang. It was Daniel. "Imam," he said quietly, no confidence left in his voice. "People are asking questions." I stayed silent. He continued. "My wife's family, they don't look at me the same anymore. They say respect matters. They say honesty matters." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I didn't lie," I said calmly. "Why only told the truth?" There was a long pause. "Mom," he finally whispered. "Why did you do that to me?" I closed my eyes. "Why did you call me ugly?" I asked gently. He had no answer. That night, I sat alone in my living room and realized something important. Children think parents will always forgive, always bend, always disappear quietly. But I was done disappearing. Days later, his wife visited me for the first time. She stood at my door, nervous, uncomfortable. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "He told me you didn't want to come." I looked at her carefully. She wasn't cruel, just young, just blind. "I wish you happiness," I told her. "But happiness built on shame does not last." She left crying, and slowly my son's perfect life began to crack. The calls from Daniel became more frequent. He needed advice. He needed money. He needed comfort. Funny how ugly mothers become useful again when life turns heavy. His marriage was struggling. Trust had been broken before it even settled. His wife questioned everything he said now. "Did you lie about your mother? What else have you lied about?" One evening, Daniel showed up at my house unannounced. He looked tired, older, smaller. "I messed up," he admitted, sitting on the couch where he once played as a child. I poured tea and placed it in front of him, just like I used to. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. I smiled sadly. "Intent does not erase impact," I replied. He asked if he could move in temporarily. Things were tense at home. His wife needed space. I shook my head. "This house raised you," I said softly. "But it will not hide you from consequences." Tears filled his eyes. "I'm your son," he said. "Yes," I nodded, "and I'm your mother." "That is why I must teach you one last lesson." He left that night without anger, only regret, and regret is a very heavy bag to carry. Months later, I heard the news from neighbors before Daniel told me himself. He lost his job. Office gossip, damaged reputation, emotional instability. Everything collapsed at once. His marriage was hanging by a thread. One rainy evening he came again. This time he knelt. "I'm sorry," he said, crying openly. "I was ashamed of you because I was ashamed of myself." I watched my son cry like he did when he was 5 years old. I placed my hand on his head. "Forgive you," I said. He looked up, hopeful. "But forgiveness does not mean forgetting," I continued. "And love does not mean control." I told him I had transferred part of my savings, not to him, but to a charity for abandoned elderly parents. His face froze. "This is my smile," I said softly. "The last one you earned." He understood then. Not all revenge is loud. Some is quiet, dignified, final. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. After that night, Daniel did not come back for a long time. No calls, no messages. At first, silence feels peaceful. Then it starts to echo. I continued my routine. Morning prayers, watering plants, feeding stray cats outside my gate. Life, at my age, becomes very quiet. But quiet is not loneliness. Quiet is reflection. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a message. A handwritten letter from Daniel. He wrote about sleepless nights, about how his wife left to stay with her parents, about how people at work no longer trusted him, about how shame followed him like a shadow. And then he wrote the sentence that finally broke me. "I never knew how beautiful you were until I tried to live without you." I held the letter to my chest and cried, not from pain, but release. When children finally understand, it is often too late to go back. I did not rush to him. Love does not chase someone who must walk their own path. Weeks later, he stood at my gate again. Thinner, quieter. "I don't need money," he said. "I don't need help. I just need to know, can you still look at me like your son?" I opened the gate, and that was my answer. Daniel started visiting regularly, not to take, not to ask, to listen. He sat beside me while I told stories from my youth, stories he never had time to hear before, stories of rejection, of being judged, of learning strength through silence. One evening he asked, "Mom, why didn't you fight back at the wedding? Why didn't you shout?" I smiled. "Maker's dignity does not scream," I said. He nodded slowly, absorbing words that came too late for easy healing. He began volunteering at the same charity I donated to. Elderly parents abandoned by their children. He cleaned rooms, served food, listened. One day, he returned home crying. He said, "Even after being hurt, I placed my hand over his." "That," I whispered, "is grace." His marriage officially ended soon after. No drama, just papers and silence. He did not blame anyone else. For the first time, he took responsibility. And that is where real change begins. Time passed. Daniel found a modest job, smaller pay, bigger humility. He stopped caring about appearances. He stopped chasing validation. He started calling me every morning, just ask if I'd eaten. One day he brought me a simple gift, a framed photograph. It was not from his wedding. It was an old photo of us. Me, tired and smiling. Him, a child, holding my hand tightly. "I was blind," he said. "I see now, for I see now." I looked at my son and saw something new. Not success, not pride. Character. "I don't need apologies anymore," I told him. "Alive better, that is enough." He nodded, tears in his eyes. Sometimes life does not punish immediately. It waits, and when it teaches deeply. Now, as I sit by my window watching the sunset, I understand something I wish every child could hear. Parents are not decorations. They are foundations. You don't hide foundations. You stand on them. My son once said I was too ugly for his wedding, but life showed him something far more important. That love ignored becomes loss. That shame grows teeth, and that dignity always survives. If you are listening to my story, remember this. One day your parents will no longer be here, and no wedding, no success, no smile will bring them back. I smiled for my son one last time, not to forgive his cruelty, but to teach him humanity, and that was enough. After everything that happened, people assumed my story had ended. But life does not end after lessons. It changes shape. Daniel began coming every Sunday evening. Not with demands, not with complaints, just presence. He would sit quietly while I knitted or watered my plants. One evening he said, "Ma'am, do you ever wish you had chosen yourself instead of me?" The question startled me. I thought for a long moment. "I did choose myself," I answered. "By choosing love. Love is never a loss, even when it hurts." He lowered his head. That night I realized my son was no longer a boy learning from mistakes. He was a man learning from consequences. And that is a far harder classroom. News travels fast in small communities. People who once praised Daniel now spoke carefully around him. Some judged him, some pitied him, and some learned quietly. One woman from church said to me, "You are very strong." I shook my head. "No," I said. "I am just done pretending pain is weakness." Daniel overheard that conversation. Later, he told me, "I spent my life chasing respect from strangers and ignored the respect that raised me." That sentence told me everything. Sometimes children don't need punishment. They need truth. And truth once seen cannot be unseen. One afternoon, Daniel asked if he could record my voice. "For what?" I asked. "For myself," he said, "so I never forget where I come from." I agreed. He recorded me telling simple stories, how I learned to cook, how I survived loneliness, how silence taught me strength. When he listened back, he cried. "You sound powerful," he said. I smiled. He smiled. "A power does not shout," I replied. "It survives." That day, my voice became something more than memory. It became warning and wisdom. Years pass quickly when you stop chasing approval. My hair grew whiter, my steps slower, but my heart lighter. Daniel changed too. He stopped introducing me apologetically. He started saying proudly, "This is my mother." One day, at a small family gathering, someone joked about aging and appearances. Daniel stood up. "A beauty is what stays when everything else leaves," he said. I looked at him and knew the lesson had finally settled. Late one night, Daniel asked the question he had been avoiding. "Mum, do you still feel ugly?" I took a deep breath. "No," I said. "I feel seen." He nodded slowly. That was when I understood something important. Healing does not erase scars. It teaches you not to bleed from them anymore. And some scars become stories that protect others.